This evening I have with me the outgoing German ambassador to Sri Lanka, Mr. Jens Plotner. A very good evening and welcome to a special discussion right here on News First.
Good evening, I'm very happy to be here.
2010 February, Mr. Ambassador, I interviewed you and I asked you a question. I asked you, was the German government satisfied the manner in which Sri Lanka has progressed following the end of the conflict? And you told me it's too early to say anything at that particular moment. I'm posing that question once again to you, Mr. Ambassador. I want to know, is the German government satisfied the manner in which Sri Lanka has progressed following the end of the conflict?
Now I know why you asked for this interview. I mean, MTV really has consistency in its questions. Indeed, 2 years have passed, more than 2 years have passed, and I think it's a good time, at least for me personally, since I'm leaving, to take stock. Mm-hmm. And I would say two things. I would say, on the one hand, there has been remarkable progress concerning reconstruction in the north and the east. Roads, schools, electricity, water. A lot has been done, and I think the government is doing really a significant effort in this field. But as I always believe, and as I think we know from many other countries, winning the war and rebuilding bridges and roads is one thing. Building peace and reaching out to the hearts and minds of all citizens is something else. And one needs to be patient because this takes longer. But I think very good results on reconstruction. Concerning reconciliation, I think there is still quite a job to be done.
The Chancellor of Germany, Helmut Kohl, said that time and space is needed for Germany to rebuild following the reunification. A similar sentiment was expressed by President Mahinda Rajapaksa as well following the end of the conflict here in Sri Lanka. However, that seems to have fallen on deaf ears. What went wrong, Mr. Ambassador, with regard to this particular statement that was made by President Mahinda Rajapaksa following the end of the conflict?
My ears weren't deaf. As you said, as a German especially, we know a little bit more, unfortunately, because it's a painful experience. We know a little bit more about reconstruction and reconciliation than other more luckier people in the world. And you're right, Helmut Kohl made that statement, and it is our intimate belief that these things take time. And that's why, as I said in my earlier answer, one needs to be patient. But what is important, I think, is that from day one, the direction in which you're going is right. It might be a long journey, but the direction has to be right, and there needs to be steady progress. So nobody is expecting 2 years after the end of the war, reconciliation is over, everybody loves each other, all problems are solved. That wouldn't be realistic. But what can be expected, and I think what the people of Sri Lanka expect, is that there is clear progress, clear and constant progress along that road.
Mr. Ambassador, you say that time and space is needed. Am I right?
Yeah.
In May 2009, Ambassador, just a few days after Sri Lanka won the war with the LTTE, 17 countries, including Germany, put in a resolution of the UN Human Rights Council saying war crimes should be investigated. However, time and space was not given at that particular moment, including Germany. I want to know, what was the sentiment at that time? What was the notion that was going through the minds of the German government when this resolution was tabled?
I think what was on our minds is the underlying understanding we have that in order to reach real sustainable peace in a society, you need to face the past. It might take some time, but at one point, earlier or later, you need to face the truth of the past. You cannot build a peaceful society on silence. You cannot build it on not talking about things that were. And that is why we felt that while reconstruction is very important, one of the prerequisites for true reconciliation is also to look into the past and to see what went wrong and to bring those to justice who committed wrong.
In the government's defense, Mr. Ambassador, they could say that the international community has not given them time and space to rebuild. Do you agree with this?
Well, if it would merely be a question of time, I think that one can talk about. But I think the impression was that there was more kind of a general absence of will to address this issue. If I might remind you, right after the war, there was this sentence of 0 casualties. which I think to everybody who lived in the country during the conflict seemed quite unrealistic. 2 years later, we've moved a bit, and I think today the government states the obvious, that of course in such a major military operation there has been a significant number of victims. So the question is, how did these people die? And I think, you know, it's not because in Berlin or in Paris, Washington or London people want to know. It's because people in Sri Lanka want to know. If you travel to the north and to the east and you speak to families, then you have a mother who says, I want to know where my son is. I have no news from him. If he's dead, I want to know that he's dead. Can somebody help me? These people don't know. And my intimate belief is, and that's a human belief, not a diplomatic belief, my intimate belief is a society will not find peace until these families have found peace, and they will find peace in knowledge, not in silence.
A US-sponsored resolution was tabled at the UNHRC recently, start of the year. I want to know what is the position of the German government on this resolution that was tabled.
We supported this resolution, and we're happy it passed quite successfully. And I was a bit surprised about the acrimonious reaction here in Sri Lanka concerning this resolution, because it's frankly speaking a quite trivial resolution. It welcomes the substantial report of the Lessons Learned of Reconciliation Commission, and it calls upon Sri Lanka to implement this very substantial report. So I think if you look into the discussion in Sri Lanka today, there are many voices who say exactly the same. So I think this is a resolution which supports a movement which anyway is quite broad in Sri Lankan society. And if I remember the chief whip of the government parliamentarian group introducing the LLRC report into Parliament, he also was very positive on the report. So I think this was quite an unuseful, unnecessary fight, one might say. It was a support for something which anyway exists in Sri Lanka.
Mr. Ambassador, addressing the UNHRC sessions, Minister Mahinda Samarsinghe, who was representing the government as the Minister of Human Rights at this session, said, those inside glass houses should be vigilant when throwing stones. Was that directed at countries like the German government?
I appreciate Minister Samarsinghe a lot. I think he's an excellent diplomat for the cause of Sri Lanka, but we didn't feel addressed by this statement, no. We wouldn't know which German glasshouse he would be talking about.
Getting on to reconciliation and accountability, I want to know what is the position of the German government in respect of these two issues, reconciliation and accountability in Sri Lanka.
The two issues are linked, as I earlier said, but I think they need to be addressed one by one. Now, reconciliation, I think, first of all, to understand that there is a need for active reconciliation, that it won't come by itself, is the first important step. And I personally and my government, we found that the start of the so-called structured dialogue between the Tamil party TNA and the government about 1.5 years ago, which were designed to bring about a political solution to the ethnic strife, was a very, very important first step. And the talks had their ups and downs, but I had the impression that they were making some progress, and all the more now we are disappointed that these talks are stalled. I don't want to get into why they are stalled, but I think that the simple fact that they are stalled is really a pity, because we placed a lot of hope in them in finding this political solution.
Now, what is the way forward? All this above with the outgoing German ambassador Jens Plotner right here on News First. Stay connected, stay with News First. We will be right back. Welcome back to our special discussion right here on News First. Mr. Ambassador, we were talking about reconciliation and accountability. Are you all satisfied the manner in which Sri Lanka has progressed with regard to these two aspects? I want to know, you told me that the talks between the TNA and the government, how it has failed and how it has stalled. That was not my question. My question to you, Mr. Ambassador, right before the break was, are you all satisfied the manner in which Sri Lanka has progressed on these two fronts, reconciliation and accountability, and also the LLRC report?
You know, don't forget you're talking to a diplomat. So if I say that I regret that talks are stalled, you can take this as a diplomatic way of saying I'm not so satisfied.
So you are not satisfied. Is that the position of the German government?
The position of the German government is that we think that more progress on reconciliation is needed, yes.
With regard to the LLRC report that was tabled by the Sri Lankan government in Parliament last year, I want to know, how do you view this report?
The LLRC report?
That's right, Mr. Ambassador.
Very positively. I think there were also quite a number of international voices criticizing the lessons learned on reconciliation. Commission members and the Commission itself, before they even tabled their interim report, my government never did so. We said these are honorable people from civil society here. Let's wait and see what they will come up with. And I think we were right to do so, because the report is very substantial. And I think if only 3/4 of the report would be implemented, it would change Sri Lanka in many ways to the better, and it would put Sri Lanka on a real peacetime footing, which I think is what is needed. So it's a good report.